The morning sun filtered through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Cathedral in downtown Chicago, casting rainbow shadows across the marble floor. I stood at the back of the church, my hands trembling as I clutched a white envelope that would change everything. The scent of incense mixed with fresh lilies filled the air, but all I could smell was betrayal. My niece Emma was about to be baptized, and I wasn't supposed to be here. According to my parents, I had forfeited my right to family moments 3 years ago when I chose love over their expectations. But as I watched my family gather around the baptismal font, my mother adjusting her pearl necklace, my father checking his watch, my brother holding his precious daughter, I felt something darker than sadness settle in my chest. Revenge isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as quiet as a letter slipped into the right hands at the perfect moment. I had spent months planning this, not out of hatred, but out of a desperate need to reclaim my place in a family that had erased me like I never existed. They thought they could rewrite history, crop me out of their perfect narrative. But today, in this sacred place where truth was supposed to matter, I would remind them that some stories refuse to stay buried. The organ began to play, and I took my first step forward into the light. 3 years ago, I was the golden child. Straight A's, law school graduate, the daughter who called every Sunday and never missed a family dinner. But love has a way of shattering even the most carefully constructed lives. When I introduced Sarah to my parents, I thought they'd see what I saw: her infectious laugh, her brilliant mind, the way she made me feel complete for the first time in my life. Instead, I watched my mother's face turn to stone. My father couldn't even look at us. "This isn't who we raised you to be," he said, his voice cutting through the silence of our family dining room like a blade. The ultimatum came 2 weeks later. Choose them or choose her, as if love was something you could simply turn off like a faucet. I chose Sarah. I chose authenticity over approval, truth over tradition. And just like that, I became a ghost in my own family. The first Christmas without them nearly broke me. Sarah held me as I cried, whispering that we'd create our own traditions, our own family. But there's a special kind of pain that comes from being erased by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally. I tried reaching out. Birthday cards returned unopened. Phone calls that went straight to voicemail. When my brother got married, I found out through Facebook. When Emma was born, I learned her name from a mutual friend. But the final straw came last month when I saw the family photo from Emma's first birthday party. There I was, or rather, there I wasn't. They had taken an old family portrait from my cousin's wedding and digitally removed me, photoshopped me out of existence like I was a stain on their perfect image. That's when I realized that playing by their rules would never bring me home. Sometimes you have to break the game entirely. The letter in my pocket had taken weeks to write. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly how powerful words could be. I had learned that from them, ironically. My father, a respected judge, had always said that the right words at the right time could change the course of history. I had done my research. Father Martinez had been at St. Mary's for 15 years, known for his progressive views and his commitment to family reconciliation. More importantly, he had a daughter who had been estranged from her own family before they found their way back to each other. The letter wasn't angry or accusatory. It was heartbreaking. It told the story of a daughter who loved her family so much that she was willing to stand in the shadows of her niece's baptism just to witness this sacred moment. It spoke of forgiveness, of unconditional love, of the Christian values that were supposed to guide us all. But the real power was in what it revealed. As I watched my family take their positions for the ceremony, I saw my mother whisper something to the photographer. The same photographer who had been cropping me out of family memories for 3 years. They were already planning how to edit this day, how to make it look like their family was complete without me. The irony was suffocating. Here, in a place dedicated to love and acceptance, they were preparing to commit the same sin of erasure they'd been perfecting for years. I slipped the letter to Father Martinez just as he was about to begin. His eyes scanned it quickly, and I watched his expression change from confusion to understanding to something that looked like righteous anger. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his vestments. Then he looked directly at me, standing in the shadows at the back of the church, and nodded. The ceremony was about to begin, But the real baptism, the washing away of years of lies and silence, was just getting started. As Father Martinez began the opening prayers, doubt crept into my chest like cold water. Was I doing the right thing? Or was I just as manipulative as they were, using a sacred ceremony to settle old scores? I thought about Sarah, waiting at home, probably pacing our kitchen floor. She had begged me not to come. "They've made their choice," she'd said, her eyes filled with the kind of pain that comes from watching someone you love get hurt over and over again. "Don't give them another chance to break your heart." But she didn't understand. This wasn't about them anymore. This was about Emma. My niece was innocent in all of this. She deserved to know that she had an aunt who loved her, who had been there for every milestone, even if only in spirit. She deserved to grow up knowing that love doesn't come with conditions, that family isn't just about blood but about choice. I watched my brother hold his daughter, his face glowing with pride and joy. Michael had always been the peacekeeper, caught between his loyalty to our parents and his love for me. I could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he kept glancing toward the back of the church as if he sensed my presence. My mother stood rigid beside him, her designer dress and perfect makeup unable to hide the exhaustion in her eyes. 3 years of maintaining this charade had taken its toll on all of them. Even my father, usually so commanding and sure of himself, seemed smaller somehow. The truth was, I missed them desperately. I missed my mother's terrible cooking and my father's awful jokes. I missed Sunday dinners and holiday traditions. I missed being part of something bigger than myself. But I also knew that the woman I had become, the woman who had learned to love authentically and live truthfully, was someone worth fighting for. And if they couldn't see that, then maybe it was time to force them to look. Father Martinez's voice echoed through the cathedral as he began the baptismal ceremony, but I could see him glancing at the letter in his hands. The congregation was focused on Emma, this tiny, perfect being in her white christening gown, but I noticed the photographer positioning himself for the family shots. My heart pounded as I realized the moment was approaching. Soon, they would gather around the font for the traditional family photo, and once again, I would be erased from Emma's story before it even began. That's when I saw him, my father's brother, Uncle Robert, sitting 3 rows from the front. He had always been the black sheep of the family, the one who asked uncomfortable questions at dinner parties. Our eyes met across the crowded church, and his face registered shock, then something that looked like relief. He knew I was here, and knowing Uncle Robert, he wouldn't stay quiet about it. I watched as he leaned over to whisper something to my cousin Maria, who turned to look in my direction. The ripple effect began slowly, family members becoming aware of my presence one by one. Some looked surprised, others uncomfortable, but none of them moved to acknowledge me. My mother must have sensed a shift in energy because she turned around, her eyes scanning the crowd until they found mine. For a moment, time stopped. I saw her face cycle through emotions: shock, anger, pain, and something else I couldn't quite identify. She whispered urgently to my father, who turned to look as well. His jaw tightened, and I could see him calculating his options. Make a scene in church? Pretend I wasn't there? Have me escorted out? But before he could decide, Father Martinez cleared his throat and stepped forward with Emma in his arms. "Before we proceed with the baptism," he said, his voice carrying clearly through the cathedral, "I'd like to read something that was brought to my attention today. A letter about the true meaning of family and forgiveness." The silence that followed was deafening. I could see my parents' faces pale as they realized what was happening. The photographer lowered his camera, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. My mother's perfectly composed mask finally cracked, and for the first time in 3 years, I saw her as she really was, a woman who had been living with the consequences of an impossible choice. Father Martinez unfolded the letter with deliberate care, his eyes sweeping across the congregation before settling on my family. The cathedral fell silent except for the soft cooing of baby Emma, blissfully unaware that her baptism was about to become something much more profound. "This letter," he began, his voice steady and clear, "comes from a daughter who loves her family so much that she stands in the shadows of this sacred day, not to disrupt, but to witness, to be present for a niece she has never been allowed to hold." I watched my mother's hand fly to her throat. her pearls catching the light as her breathing became shallow. My father's face had turned ashen, his usual commanding presence crumbling as the priest's words echoed through the sacred space. The letter speaks of a young woman who chose love over fear, authenticity over approval. It tells of parents who, in their pain and confusion, made choices that have left their family broken. But it also speaks of hope, of the possibility of redemption, of the Christian values we claim to hold dear. Father Martinez paused, looking directly at my parents. It asks a simple question: what would Jesus do? Would he turn away a daughter who loves differently? Would he erase someone from his family because they chose a path he didn't expect? The silence was suffocating. I could see my brother's wife clutching his arm, tears streaming down her face. Uncle Robert was nodding slowly, and I caught sight of several family friends looking uncomfortable, perhaps remembering their own moments of judgment. The letter also reveals something troubling. Father Martinez continued, his tone becoming more serious. It speaks of family photos being altered, of a daughter being digitally erased from memories, of a systematic campaign to pretend she never existed. My mother let out a small gasp, and I saw my father's hands clench into fists. They knew they'd been exposed, their carefully maintained facade cracking in front of their entire community. But here's what strikes me most about this letter, the priest said, his voice softening. It doesn't ask for revenge. It doesn't demand apologies. It simply asks to be included in this moment, to be allowed to love this child who shares her blood. He looked directly at me then, and I felt every eye in the cathedral follow his gaze. It asks for what we all deserve: the chance to be part of a family that loves without conditions. The photographer had stopped taking pictures entirely, his camera hanging forgotten around his neck. Even Emma seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Her tiny fist curled around Father Martinez's finger as he held her. So before we baptize this beautiful child, he said, I'm going to ask her family to make a choice. We can proceed with the ceremony as planned, with some members hidden in shadows and others pretending they don't exist. Or we can do something radical. We can choose love over pride, inclusion over image, truth over tradition. He extended his arms, holding Emma toward my parents. The choice is yours. But remember, this child will grow up with whatever decision you make today. What kind of family do you want her to inherit? The silence stretched on, heavy with possibility and pain, as 3 years of hurt and stubbornness hung in the balance. My mother was the first to move. She stepped forward, her heels clicking against the marble floor, each step echoing through the cathedral like a heartbeat. When she reached me, her perfectly applied makeup was streaked with tears I hadn't seen her shed since my grandmother's funeral. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'm so sorry. The dam burst then. My father followed, then Michael, then the rest of the family, until I was surrounded by the people I had missed so desperately. Uncle Robert was crying openly, and even the photographer had tears in his eyes as he raised his camera again. Father Martinez baptized Emma with our entire family present, no one hidden in shadows, no one erased. When it came time for the family photo, he insisted on taking it himself. This, he said, is what a real family looks like. Imperfect, complicated, but complete. Later, as we gathered for the reception, my mother pulled me aside. We lost 3 years, she said, her voice heavy with regret. 3 years of your life, of watching you become this incredible woman. I don't know if we can get that back. We can't, I said, surprising myself with how easily the forgiveness came. But we can start from here. Sarah arrived just as the party was winding down, nervous and beautiful in the dress I'd bought her months ago, hoping for a day like this. I watched my parents meet the woman I loved, really meet her, and saw them begin to understand what I had known all along. As we drove home that evening, Sarah reached over and took my hand. How does it feel? She asked. I thought about the letter, about the risk I'd taken, about the choice my family had made when faced with truth. Like coming home, I said. Finally coming home. The family photo sits on our mantle now, unedited and honest. Emma is at the center, surrounded by all of us, the perfect and the imperfect, the traditional and the unexpected. A family that chose love over fear, Inclusion over image. Sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to disappear. If this story touched your heart, if you've ever felt erased or forgotten by the people who should love you most, remember this: your truth matters. Your love is valid. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to stay in the shadows. Subscribe and share this story with someone who needs to hear it today. Because there are families out there still learning that love doesn't come with conditions, and stories like this might just help them find their way home.